Hi, everyone. Welcome to Music Talk here from McNally Robinson. We're at Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis, at the best bookstore, I think, in all of Treaty 6. I'm Mark, and I'm here tonight with Eric. Hello, Eric.
Hello, Mark.
We were just saying that it's been almost a full year since you and I were in these seats together.
Exactly.
That's hard to believe.
I know. And doing a show in these seats for TCU because last year was still at St. John's.
It's been 2 years this week. No,
That's
last
right.
week that we were here for Memoriam Requiem.
Wasn't it March 7th?
Something like that.
Yeah.
The concert, I think, was March 7th.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That's a long time ago.
2 years.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's this week does seem like a weird anniversary.
Right.
Like it does seem like a strange, like, oh yeah, that was 2 years ago
Yeah.
that everything
Shut down.
changed.
Yeah.
I remember leading up to Memoriam Requiem and like all of us thinking like, is this going to be a thing? And then Rebecca Dale, of course, flew in.
And
we were worried because she was coming from Europe where
That's
they already
right.
had cases.
That's right.
And there were no cases in Canada.
That's right.
And then hilariously on her flight home, there was a case.
Right.
But she was fine. But it was like and then days later,
Yeah.
we were supposed to help. We were supposed to be on the Juno stage.
Exactly.
We had our little Juno badges. We were
Yeah.
going to meet Anne Marie.
That's right.
And then my dreams of meeting Anne Marie
Hippo in the bathtub
were
was
just
gone.
gone.
It was
So-
those went down the drain just like the hippo.
Just like just like that hippo. Hard to believe. 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
It's been a long time, and it's pretty fitting that the anniversary is that concert because now we're doing another big choir concert.
Exactly.
And it's the first one back for the big choir.
Yeah, to have full forces back on stage, and choir period, frankly, which has felt alien for 2 years, because for a while there, of course, choirs were the most dangerous thing in the world. Not just during the pandemic, frankly, that might just be an all-time thing. But it is exciting to be able to have both Greystone singers and Aurora Vache on stage with us this weekend because, like you said, that was the send-off into the pandemic for us.
Mm-hmm. It was a great send-off.
It was one of the most memorable of all send-offs.
Was, yeah.
But strange.
Very strange.
That it's now 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And of course you were here, but we didn't have you here at McNally this past fall when we did a show with Thorgy Thor.
That's right. That's right.
At which I think you had the most fun seat in the house.
Oh, it was it was the best, and it was funny because I was usually, as you know, I like to tell my jokes and all that, but I was the straight man to Thorgy.
Because you had to be. Cause
she was just
over the top.
Rapid fire. It was wonderful.
Yeah, and kept you on your toes. And what anyone who was at that concert will know how kind of crazy it was on stage. We didn't really know because rehearsal was just kind of like play through. Oh yeah, it'll be fine. We'll do that. And then we'd all she didn't do her shtick.
Right.
So we didn't know what was happening.
It was all a surprise.
Literally. Yeah. That was a lot. Was a lot. But you were here for that, and that was nice to have you on stage for that show because it was so much fun, and it was one of those pre-pandemic those shows that we had planned pre-pandemic,
right?
That got canceled in the early pandemic.
I think it was wasn't Thorgy supposed to be the next concert after the
so we had Accent and then
That's
Thorgy.
Right. That's right.
And so Accent, thankfully, we are doing in 2 weeks' time.
Right. Yeah.
At 2 weeks to the day that it was or 2 years to the day that it was supposed to be done. So that's kind of cool. And then Thorgy was the next.
Right.
And we were her first gig back post-pandemic.
Right.
Which is just wild.
Yeah.
How's the last 2 years been?
Long 2 years.
Right? It's been weird, hasn't it? Like it's been weird to adjust to music making in all of this time.
Yeah, and it's I was talking to Karen the other day.
Your Karen.
Yes, my Karen, about how even when things are starting to open up now, that feels so new or so like, oh right, that's how it was when we're kind of all dying to get back to it, but because it just kept getting prolonged, there is something about this. Oh, it's kind of new again, getting back to this normalcy or whatever pre-pandemic is never going to be that way again. But there is a sense of, oh, I remember how this kind of worked in a way.
I find people without their masks don't look as good as I imagine them to have looked.
that is a thing.
Like, I gave every single person the benefit of the doubt. Every single person.
That's true. And if you're having a bad day, or you think you're having a bad day, you can also cover up.
Exactly. So. You don't like. You just. That's another thing. Like, smiling again is a lot.
Yes, it actually is very tiresome.
It really is.
Yeah. In Toronto, we're still masked, so we haven't got to that stage yet. But a lot of times with a mask, you don't have to hide anything.
I know.
If you don't want to smile, you don't have to smile.
I know.
Yeah.
Maybe we should all just adopt them from now on to be a permanent source of masked glory.
Right.
So you were with us many times last year. And you had your first rehearsal with the strings last night.
That's right.
It's way different to have a full set of strings back, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It is weird and fascinating to have gone from all the work we did in that pandemic time to back to full stage, full orchestra, full forces. It feels different.
And it's funny because when we did switch to these smaller, concerts, there was something refreshing and new about it. And you're like, oh, okay, this is gonna work. Actually, this is great. Well, do this. And then, so that's in your mind. And then when we come back, like yesterday, to this, you're like, oh, and there's a groundedness or something about it that kind of goes, oh, I know this. Like, this is a nice feeling.
Yeah, it's the energy in the room.
Yeah,
like that groundedness is a good. Like, it feels real.
Yes.
I'm so proud of everything we did last year and all of the adjusting to sometimes literally the week of a concert to make something happen.
Right.
We both remember, and probably we'll both have shell shock from that Oktoberfest concert for years to come, because the like 8 days beforehand the provincial rules changed, and all of a sudden it's like, well,
okay,
here we go.
Yeah.
But there is it has been fascinating because musicians, we all say there's nothing like the thrill of the sound of a full symphony orchestra, and now that we're doing it again, it's actually true. It's not just something we say.
That's right. There is a feeling. There's a whole collectively. I mean, and it's a warm feeling. Yeah,
it is, and it's an overwhelming sensation, and it's great.
Yeah.
So much better than I remembered it being. Anyone who has questions tonight, please feel free to type them in the chat. They get beamed magically to my device here, and I'll be able to ask them of Eric. So this weekend is a special concert. We've got the choirs on stage, but also we've dedicated this concert to frontline workers, healthcare workers. We're also going to do a little bit of a very brief in memoriam at the start of the show to recognize some folks who we've lost in this last year. There's far too many to actually name, but there are some that need to be named. Dr. Isabel Mills, who was such a important figure in Saskatoon's musical community for decades. Margaret Caldwell, who was on our board and a volunteer and a subscriber. Colin McDonald, who was a board chair. There's been such change in these 2 years, and I think that's why this piece is perfect.
It is, yeah, and we've talked about it in the press and the media interviews we've been giving, but the Brahms wrote this as not an old school Latin text death mass, so to speak. It's more he even called it a human requiem, so a human piece of work where even the first and last words of the whole piece are Selig, which is blessed. And so that alone, a lot of people at the premiere, some of the clergy thought it wasn't Christian enough. And so getting back to this in memoriam, it is still about death, but it's an uplifting going forward.
Yeah, and it's almost a requiem for the living.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is there are not a lot of uplifting requiems. Foray.
Yeah,
which was your very first concert here in Saskatoon.
That's right.
Like a long time ago.
Yeah, April
2015.
2015. That's right.
That's a long time ago.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. But other than that, Materna Requiem was very uplifting.
Yes.
But most requiems are are downers.
they are, and this and I mean, we all know Brahms's music as luscious and warm, romantic, but with the classical bent. And it doesn't. It's the same with the Requiem, and with this work, he was only about 32, 33 or so when he started, or around that time, and finished it. And so he had already established himself as a composer, but not as who we know as Johannes Brahms. And so this work really kind of, elevated him to that other level. And with those textures where he just kind of dug into it and leaned into his style. Of course, it's good Brahms, so he will bring in the Baroque, he'll bring in the fugues, he'll bring in a lot of Beethoven stuff as well. But there's always the Brahms stuff, the 4-against-3, constantly. The vocal writing is beautiful. And
he was a great composer for the voice.
Yeah.
Like, really, his lead are phenomenal.
And it just fits. It just fits beautifully. And we have two soloists, Brendan Friesen and Emma Johnson, as opposed to not Emma. I used to say, who's the British actor?
Emma Thompson. Not Emma Thompson.
Not Emma
we
Thompson.
Couldn't get her.
Yes,
no,
I know.
And also her Brahms.
Yeah, I think Emma Johnson is better.
I think her
much better.
Emma Johnson's Brahms much better.
Yeah, but two wonderful singers, and the way Brahms uses those voices is also, it's not oversaturated at all. It's a little bit of a solo, but the choir is always there for support. The soprano movement he added later. And it's more as we will comfort you, I will comfort you, as a mother does. And the choir is the mother.
Okay, so that's where I want to go next. So Brahms's mother's died, and he starts this Requiem. Now, I mean, he had started some of it when Robert Schumann had died, second movement in particular, but Brahms's mother dies, and that has a big impact on him, and that's sort of the match that sets this afire.
Yeah.
Like you say, this was young Brahms. We hadn't seen giant orchestral works from him yet.
Right.
How do you approach it? I mean, I know Brahms symphonies are so unique to conduct because they're not like Beethoven. They're not. They are a beast in and of themselves because it's so Brahms.
Yeah.
Is this music like that?
In a way, it's. I briefly mentioned it before. I always think of Brahms as a classical composer, so like a Mozart, Haydn composer, born, 20 years too late, in that his whole idea of composition was based on that, and even earlier in Bach. And of course, that was the split in the camps. It was Brahms against Wagner, and so with this work, and it's his first major work, it's about 75 minutes, it has the full forces, you get a hint of what's to come with the symphonies. And with, it's funny that the impetus was his mother dying, or like the continuing of that writing. And also you mentioned Schumann, because there's such a big connection between the, so you might know that there's a bit of a triangle with Robert and Clara Schumann and Brahms, and Clara was, of course, much older than Brahms, and Brahms's mother was 17 years older than his father. So, of course, there's some, Oedipus.
There's a lot
something's going
on. There's a
there.
lot at play.
Yeah, and so I think it's not only his mother dying, and this is only my interpretation, but mother dying, but also his longing for Clara, and also his love of Robert. And Robert was the one who declared this is the next big composer, and Brahms had struggled a lot to live up to that, and here he finally just blew it open. And so, getting back to your question of how do you approach that, it's funny because that classical approach, which is so Schumann as well, because he wasn't a full-on romantic, full-blown composer, is very structurally sound. There's not a lot of, what do we do here? What do we do here? It fits so beautifully. And of course, you interpret it in different ways. But with that choir, the great vocal writing, and the structure of the piece, it's simply there. and to bring out those colors. And he writes the orchestra. There's not that many fortes, not that many fortissimos. It's a very lush, but in a soft-hued way.
And there's some strange things about the orchestration. If I recall, there are no violins in the first movement.
That's right. Yeah.
For social reasons or just for musical reasons, or hard to tell. But which is strange. It's strange that they're not there. There's only timpani. There's no other percussion.
Yeah.
Which, particularly for that period of time, that's a bit odd.
Yeah.
A lot of composers had big percussion sections by that. It was 1865-ish.
That's right.
So that's also a bit strange.
Yeah.
What is it like orchestrally? How does he use those textures? What are the oddities?
Well, it's funny because Brahms was never a big percussion guy. So he would, in his symphonies even, he'd use a triangle once in a while and this and that, but he was never one to let go like Tchaikovsky or Berlioz, who was even younger than Brahms. And Berlioz's Requiem was like massive with the whole thing. And so orchestrally, it is I approach it like a symphony, because that writing is the oddities of it are like you mentioned, but it's very much like his serenades. He has 2 serenades, and one of them is without violins. And so Brahms, of course, is a massive fan of viola. He wrote the clarinet sonatas, 2 of them, but he also transcribed them he himself for viola. And he preferred the viola. I say that. I'm not sure if Brahms said that. So it's unusual in terms of what it is, but when you get to know Brahms, it's not that unusual in terms of he would want to start it with such a warm sound, because it's just the strings. That's all it is at the beginning, with that those low sounds, divisi, celli, and violas. And then when the winds do come in, it's like a symphony. There's the one of the fugues sounds like the Academic Overture. The beginning of Brahms 4 comes in. All these symphonies, you can just hear where he's going later on, and it's a beautiful. The structure is so well defined, and when he goes, it's not straight on harmonic. You know where it's going. Brahms always has a twist, and even with the choir, that makes it hard sometimes. You think you're going this beautiful melody, and then he'll switch all of a sudden. He'll go up, a minor third. You're kind of like, go, what's going on? And then he comes out of it a bar and a half later. He does this a lot, but with his structure and how he writes it, it just seems so natural and smooth in the writing. So
let's talk structure for a bit, because, as you say, he added the movement with soprano later, but we have this unique structure that sort of is. It feels like really well planned, like on 100 and some years later, it feels like, oh my God, he drew this this arch of ideas, right? 1 and 7 are both slow movements. 2 and 6 are more dramatic. 5 and 3 have solos, and then there's 4. We'll get to 4 later. He was sort of an architect.
Very much, very much, and this is building on the whole structural classical form, because. We know that the Romantic era kind of blew structure out, and Wagner was one to just blow it out, and Brahms and Schumann, they're the ones to say no. We have to learn from the past, because at this time, this was the time that the word classical started coming into use, because up until then you didn't really play a lot of old composers. It was always new music, but then there's this whole thing of, you know what? We have to respect what came before. We've got to learn from them.
And by this point, I mean, exactly. Bach's music, Mozart's music, Beethoven, they were all starting to get used academically in the concert hall. Yeah,
that's right. And before that, they weren't. You just, if you're a composer, you got your music, or you try to get your music played, and it was played. And so yeah, you're right, where you've got the 7 movements, you've got the middle one, and structurally it's beautiful. And of course he did have the first movement, the last movement is based on the first movement, of course, the similar material, and it's a little bit different in tempo, but it's a very similar, and I'm sure he had that structure in mind. But like you say, not the way that we look at it now, not even close to that. So it's kind of beautiful how it all worked out.
Yeah, and it is funny how much time gives us the opportunity to analyze these things, and you have to wonder, did they notice what we are noticing? Obviously, those last movements, sure, but the rest of that, yeah, you do have to wonder whether he actually saw all the things we now see in it as musicologists pick it apart limb from limb.
Well, and that's just it. Like when he even composed it, or any composer, you don't know how well it's going to do. You think it might be performed once and then it's never performed again. So he had no idea. Like he had an inkling, but not to the degree that it's going to be one of the great requiems in history. And so you probably can't think that way as a composer, and that's why he could add the movement later on. That's why he could go, oh, you know what? And a lot of composers would edit. Well, Bruckner was the guy who edited until there was nothing left. But
and living composers often do.
Yes.
At so our last concert cycle, we did Chrysalis Extended by Nia Amani Franklin, and on Tuesday afternoon we got new parts.
Exactly.
Because she had talked to Judith on the phone the day before and went, oh, I meant to redo that. And then she did.
Yeah.
Now it was minor changes, but it was still
living
composers just change things
all the time. Yeah.
And so he was able to add. It's unique. You mentioned this earlier. It's not a liturgical requiem. So normally requiems have the set movements, the Kyrie, the Benedictus, the Sanctus, those types of things. This does not. It's not liturgical. It is biblical text still that he compiled.
That's right.
Yeah. And because of that, it's also not. It's fascinating that he took the idea from what was essentially only written for church.
Mm-hmm.
Now requiems, Mozart Requiem is performed in concert hall. All the the Baroque requiem, but they weren't actually meant for the concert hall. They were meant for the church.
Right.
This was meant for the concert hall.
Exactly, and that's why there was that at first, some pushback from the clergy saying, "Hold on, there's not even a mention of Jesus Christ or the redemption of Christ," and so it's funny, and that's where he's quoted in saying, "I would rather it be called a human requiem than any other type of requiem," and these texts. He has the Beatitudes in them from the Blessed. He has. What I love about this requiem is we know the words to the Messiah. Like everyone knows the words. It's sung in English every year. We know those words. And when they're switched to German and then in completely different character of music, it's really fascinating. There is one of the movements is it's grand and full of death wears thy sting. And of course, in the Messiah, it's the one right before the finale, right before the Amen, and it's a beautiful duet between the tenor and the alto. And it's lilting and gorgeous. I think we've discussed it. It's one of our favorite.
We did it one of the years.
Yeah.
It's rarely done.
Yeah, exactly. And to hear it in this context, and also the bass has in a twinkling of an eye. Yeah, twinkling of an eye. But it's so different than what the Messiah is. So I love those little twists as well. But he also used, of course, the Lutheran Bible. He was a Protestant. He was from Hamburg. And there was that, at the beginning, that conflict between the northern German Protestantism and the Catholicism of southern Germany. And there's a bit of a conflict there. And people trying to play each other off. No, don't perform this because of this and this. But the greatness of the work overrode that pretty quickly.
Yeah. It's funny, as you were mentioning Messiah, it made me think also that this is a unique moment because our two soloists, Emma Thompson and Brendan Friesen, don't get actually to sing all that much. It's so unlike the Baroque and classical oratorios because normally you get an aria. If you get to stand up and sing at some point, you also get an aria somewhere in the show. They don't in this. Sometimes they sing very briefly, and then that's it. It's a unique way to use soloists because they are the dialogue with the choir.
That's right. It's almost like the evangelist in the Passions in a way where even yes, of course they have some melodies, of course it's Brahms, but when the choir comes back in after a very short solo moment, let's say, you go, oh, and then you're kind of grounded again, because especially at the beginning, the first of the bass solo, it's more not a recitative, but it's more of a kind of telling of something, and then the choir comes in, we're like, oh, we're back to this warmth, and of course it goes back and forth. But you're right in that there's a certain amount of not speaking but telling of something, and the choir reassures, the comforting. Almost always the choir is comforting.
How do you approach choral works? You've done a lot of them. You're very good at choral works. I will say that not only on behalf of me, but on behalf of singers who work with you. Choirs really enjoy working with you.
Enjoy that.
Yeah, you're very good at it because you think it all through. You've got that brain for it. Not every conductor does, so it's really appreciated. How do you approach choral works? What I'm really excited about is we're filming, of course, this weekend. It's all being live streamed.
Right.
We get to have a camera on you. Right. So for the first time, the audience gets to see that you essentially sing the whole damn thing.
Right. Yeah, well, that's the answer to the question. I sing it.
Whole thing.
I sing it.
You know every entrance. It's really remarkable to watch you do it, and I've always felt bad that the audience doesn't get that.
Right.
Because we do backstage, and the choirs, and they get to watch you do that. Right. We get to this weekend finally.
Well, and that's what I think why I enjoy them so much is because I get to sing them, and when I'm preparing it, I of course sing all the different lines, and you get to know the words well and all the different expressions and how, like in German, there's the northern Germans that say herrlich, excuse me, and the southern say herrlich. And so and most choirs say the sh, but I learned in northern Germany, so I have to switch my brain for that, which is always kind of fun. You go, ooh, okay, no, you got to do it this way. And then there's a choir. When you have 4 parts, or sometimes 5 or 6, it's so fun, especially in Brahms, to see the contrapuntal writing, to see the entrances, all of those mixes, and so it's just enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a long choir work. It is. Like longer than many.
Yeah.
Shorter than Messiah.
That's true.
Just a third, really.
That's true.
We're just in intermission by this point.
Yeah.
But it's a choral work of significant heft.
Yes.
So it's going to be a thrill to hear it. It is cathartic.
Very.
In that, we were talking about uplifting. For a Requiem, there is in the In Paradisum, there is this sense of joy. Mm-hmm. It's not that Brahms ends with joy, but he's taken us from that darkness through to light, and it's a comfort rather than a sensation of joy.
I've said it in a couple of interviews already this week. It's a warm hug. That's how it feels. And this is what I'm talking about, the choir textures, where you just kind of want to melt into it. And that's why it's such a joy to sing along. I won't sing out loud. In my head.
We could mic you. That we wouldn't put it through to the stream,
no.
But we could, just for our own purposes. And then, like the director's cut after the fact.
Right.
The commentary along with it. Yeah, that could be fun.
But there is that warmth. There's that pillow of comfort that you sink into. You really sink into, and that's what he's so good at, that sort of writing.
We are lucky this weekend because we're actually starting the concert with a bit of a surprise for the audience, in that the Lastvika Ukrainian choir is joining us on stage to sing the Ukrainian national anthem. I think it's trite to say that music can make a difference right now, but it has been really exciting, and it's been a wonderful act of solidarity to see all of the orchestras, all the opera companies around the world really stand up for Ukraine. Amazing how hard it is to find the Ukrainian national anthem in a score that can be sung with, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
But we are really grateful that Lastvika is coming to join us. Of course, they performed with the SSO years and years ago. We did the Ukrainian Christmas concert that was just before you came on board, and so it's very cool to have those folks back on board. What role does music have right now? I realize that's a bit of a loaded question because we are currently in a world where there's a lot of orchestras pulling Russian repertoire from their next few concerts. And I, as a musician, I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. It's what role does music play right now?
Oh, this is a question that's been asked forever, and this is something I think we celebrate and we struggle with all of our lives, because it's like you said, it's wonderful that we are standing united with Ukraine all over the world with the musical organizations, and that should be there. And then there's a question, like you say, do we pull Tchaikovsky? Do we pull these works? And music in itself, I mean, Tchaikovsky, that's going way back, and that's going back to there's political upheaval for centuries and centuries, and so it's a very tough question. But music itself, what does music do? Like you said, it's a bit trite to say that music can change the world. At some level, it can, or it helps. I don't think in and of itself it changes the world necessarily, but it helps to change perspectives, to change people, and that's what changes. That's what the world. That's how we change the world, through people, of course. And so it's one of those questions that's debated. Like Bernstein used to say it, and of course it does, and there's comfort in it. If something is meaningful to an individual who hears it or plays it, of course that is very comforting. It's like the cellists in the 90s in the Sarajevo, who would take his cello out and play Bach's suites during the bombing of Sarajevo. That's of course that is going to inspire, comfort, all of that, and it does to us as well. And this question comes up in Israel every year about playing Wagner. Wagner was a well-known anti-Semite, and there are many Israeli musicians who love Wagner and play Wagner. But that's a very big question. That's a personal question, and something that I don't think there's a simple answer to it. But music does change people, and I think it's very, very important to have the arts during these times.
Yeah, because people, I mean, as we saw during the pandemic, people turn to something bigger than themselves, and music was one of those things. As we got to experience through live streaming and seeing all the impact that had during the pandemic, I think it is important, and I think also, I often think about some of the orchestras that have highlighted. There was the orchestra that had musicians from both East and West Germany. There's the orchestra from Israel that has both Israelis and Palestinians. The Galileo, or the Galilee.
Istvan.
Istvan, yes, yeah. And there's another one as well. Like it's we have seen the fact that actually sitting amongst music stands and old scores, there can be common ground even amongst people who have great differences. And so I hope that maybe that's part of the role that music needs to help.
I think you're exactly right. I think you're right. Two people from different parts of the world can listen to the same piece and feel inspired and motivated and comforted. And just look at the simple idea of a pop song of 3 minutes and how that can affect millions of people, or people from preventing them from committing suicide or this or that. That's very, very, very powerful. And so, for instance, to have the Ukrainian national anthem this Saturday, that's a uniting, a powerful, powerful thing. And that's music. That's what it does.
Yeah, it's going to be a very emotional moment to start with, and I'm very grateful that our friends at Les Vika have been able to join us on stage for this special moment. One of the questions that has come in is do you have a favorite moment in the Brahms? The Requiem, not just in Brahms in general. Do you have a favorite Brahms moment? Narrow that down.
Well, that's a great question, because yesterday I think in the rehearsal I said it 2 or 3 times. I say, well, this is the most beautiful part of the Requiem, and then 20 minutes later I said, well, no, hold on, this is the most beautiful part. I love love the 3/4 time. Da, na, 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 na. It's a Bach chorale in 3/4 time, and there's something beautiful about it when the choir comes in. It's just a sweeping thing. I also there's so many moments. The moments that I love in the Requiem is when Brahms will incorporate that Baroque chorale-like music and put a twist on it, and it's always the suspensions at the end. He'll slow down the cadence, so it'll be instead of 2 bars 4, and then he'll suspend things, and then it will resolve into something gorgeous, and then the orchestra usually takes that and does their own spin on it, and that is just magical every time.
One of the other questions is, how do you balance between expressing the emotion and feeling the emotion in this kind of emotional music?
Yeah, well, I mean that's for so much music, and as performers, this is something that's really, it kind of works itself out in its way, because you have to concentrate, and by I don't mean we're like, okay, now we're gonna turn the emotions off and just concentrate. I mean that there's stuff to do. And it's just like driving a car. You can't just sit back like this in heavy traffic and just like,
I mean, with the right Tesla.
that's true. But just kind of go like this and look around. You can still sing along to the radio or do whatever you want, have a great conversation, but you're still focused. And it's the same thing with music making, where you're beautifully enjoying the music, and then you do a cue so that they come in. So you're not gonna get so overwhelmed by the passion that you're gonna forget to give a cue, or a violinist gonna forget to come in. Once in a while, if you're, it does happen, and we'll cry during it if something's so moving, but there's that automatic part of you that keeps going through all of that.
One of the questions that has come in is, how do you get to what's it like to collaborate with a choral conductor? Now, you're very privileged because you get to work with Jen Lang this week.
Yes.
And we love working with Jennifer, and she leads both the Greystone and Aurora Voce. Let's talk about the schedule, because orchestral conductors, you don't get the privilege of working with the choir, because the choir has been working for a long time. Orchestra had its first rehearsal. Well, strings had their first rehearsal last night. Orchestral rehearsal Wednesday night is the first one. And then you get a limited amount of time.
That's right. Yeah. Like you said, it's a privilege working with people like Jen, because she prepares the choir so well. And we also have been working together for years now, so she knows she can guess ahead what I like articulation in certain words and this sort of thing. So when I come there on Thursday, I'm going to go to their rehearsal by themselves. It'll be wonderful, because she'll have prepared them so well, and then I can just do little things here and there, different tempos or articulations and phrasing and balance. And then with the orchestra, that's the thing, is that whole balance of getting that choir. And what I love when it comes together is having the choir being its own instrument, so that you can hear what they've been working so hard to do, and that articulation, that twist of phrase. And if the audience can hear that and balance it with the orchestra, and it all come together, that's pretty magical.
Yeah, it is pretty magical. It's one of those magical moments where you get the tingle about how magical music can be, which is really great. When you are approaching having, I often, because I don't have to conduct. It's great. It's my favorite part of my job. A work like this, monumental, massive, and you get 5 rehearsals with the orchestra and 3-ish rehearsals with the choir. What is it like to manage that, like from a time perspective?
You have to be very efficient with your time, and to make sure that we all feel comfortable with what we're performing. I think that's a very, very important thing, so that we don't spend too much time on one thing and then lose the picture on something else. I think to be efficient, to get it all in, and there's something about that comfortability factor. Of course, you want the edge, but that comes with the performance anyway. So that when we get to the performance, that's when we can forget everything and just go. Yeah. And when we've used it efficiently and rehearsed well, then that's when we can really flow. And that's building up to that moment.
Yeah, and very fine conductors know how to pace that so that you don't actually peak
right
in dress rehearsal.
Right.
And that there is still something to work on so that there is that. And you do that. I've watched you do that now for 7 years. And it's that anticipating, creating the moment when the moment's supposed to happen.
That's right.
And that's something I wish more people in the world learned how to do, not just conductors, because that is being able to create a pretty incredible process.
Right. Yeah. And that's I think that's why we perform, don't we? Is for those moments. For those moments when they surprise you, even though we've all been rehearsing, when we all get surprised by something and there's a smile and you're like, oh, yes, that's it. Yeah.
This has been delightful. We are officially fully out of questions. You've got a busy week of rehearsals of I think you're done media interviews now, are you?
I
have more.
I've got more, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We put you to the test these weeks.
That's good.
We put you to the test. You and I get to sit back in these chairs in May.
That's right.
To talk Mahler 4.
Mm-hmm.
Evidently, we just put one thing on each of your programs.
That's right.
Who needs the rest? But it's 75 minutes. Do you really need more?
Well, that's just.
I mean, that's just it.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to that, and that will also mark your last music talk as music director. As we officially announced this week. Which gives us all in the office, we all get time to process, so that we're not blubbering messes that week. So we'll all be better. We'll all be good. But we've known for a long time.
Yes.
And that has always been part of the trajectory. And you talked about wanting to be able to create like a timeline for yourself.
Yeah.
That allowed transition for you, for the orchestra, etc. And you've done that really well. So thank you for that, because not all of my colleagues end up. We won't talk about that anyway.
No, thank you. That's I think it's so important for arts organization to have an ongoing process, so that it's always going somewhere, and the SSO is in such good form, such a good spot that it's so exciting, and I just can't wait as a spectator to watch as the orchestra unfolds over the next number of years. It's been a really exciting time, and I look forward to so much more.
Yeah, well, and I look forward to being able to remember some of those great times, because there have been some phenomenal moments on stage and off stage that no one knew about.
True.
And so we'll figure out a way to share those with the audience as we go along. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for enjoying Brahms this week. You are as someone who produces things, Brahms is always scary to put in the hands of anyone, because it's Brahms. Like it's like Bach,
right.
Like Beethoven, sure, whatever, and but those are two. Bach and Brahms that's sacred music in and of itself,
right? And
so it's an absolute thrill to have you on the podium this
weekend.
weekend.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. A huge thank you to Rowan and everyone here at McNally Robinson. Have a wonderful night. Hope you can join us in the hall Saturday night at TCU Place at 7:30 p.m. or you can join us online at concertstream.tv. Have a great night.